Hello, Miles here from the team at Iconic Events. I'm joined here today by Stuart Trevithick, who's a design leader joining us this year at the Design Leaders Plus conference. That's day 2, all about scaling your design leadership. That's this November, the 11th and 12th of November. There is a week-long conference with lots of other exciting content, no matter what your level or specialism. But today's all about Stuart. So Stuart, thanks so much for joining us.
Brilliant, thanks, Miles.
And I'd love to just hand the mic straight to you. I've given you a very high-level introduction, but why don't you tell us a bit more about yourself, your current or most recent role, and what's really got you started in this career in design through to being a design leader? So quite a loaded question to open the gates.
Yeah, quite a lot to cover, but I'll go back to the beginning where I started. So at school, I definitely was an academic. My best subjects were art, so fine art, painting, sculpture, graphic design, and athletics. So, you know, I could run fast and I'm pretty good at drawing. So when it came to choosing a career, I wasn't particularly sure, and I did my degree in fine art. But I walked into a friend's studio who had started back in '99. They were building websites and interactive CD-ROMs, which at the time was very new. And I just fell in love with it. I could do and create these styles and this type of animation and the quality of line, which I just couldn't do by hand. So for a year, I was literally strapped to a computer, learned how to program, learned how to design on computer, like animation, video editing. And that really just wrapped me up to where I am today. And so from that point to now, which is 25 years, I moved away through different design and engineering practices, agency side and client side, and then wound up in my previous, or I guess current but previous role as global head of digital standards of practice at Fidelity International, which was being their creative director as well as running their design operations. And I left that role in January because I believed that I got myself in such a great place and delivered everything I wanted to do. It was a great opportunity to move forward. So I've been enjoying some fantastic time off, getting back to my roots, doing morning qigong, tai chi, and getting back into design and painting again.
That's awesome. It's nice and refreshing to have that bit of self-care time, right? But what, out of interest, you obviously mentioned, you know, leading the sort of the creative direction and the design ops, but what does it mean to lead digital standards within an organization like Fidelity?
Well, it's quite far-reaching, so I found out. So what happens when you start building design systems and standardizing things is that you uncover other fractions within the organization. So why a lot of companies run with different verticals in the organization, we're horizontal. So we're talking to everyone about everything. And part of that is to understand all the different types of users and user behavior, whether it's consumer or B2B, across 32 different countries. As you can imagine, you start unpicking and uncovering all kinds of issues. Now, within that, it can be quite problematic because when you uncover these issues, it goes back to you found it, you fix it, which isn't the easiest thing to do. But what you do start to realize is there are synergies across these and there are common problems. And actually, if you can articulate that, and this really comes back to how to be a design leader, right? You need to understand the business. You need to understand how they talk, how they walk, and how they progress things. So the more you can understand that, the more value you're going to bring, and the higher design is going to be seen in the business, and the higher value you're going to bring to you, your team, and your customers.
Amazing. Thanks for that answer. And it's a long career, 25 years in this industry. Before we get onto your talk, which is obviously what we're going to be going into a bit more depth about, I'd love for you to share, if you can, any sort of moments or projects in your career that you're particularly proud of, be it at Fidelity or prior.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's a lot to pick from, actually, and that's quite a hard one to say. It's like what's your favorite song? You know, that's like, or who's your favorite child? You know, you're going to frustrate someone. For me, I think it probably was at Fidelity, and I think it was this moving from creating very UK market experiences, or in a previous role, RSA Group Insurance. Most of the projects we did, although we're in different parts of the world, were pretty much for those markets. But in Fidelity, we were trying to create stuff that worked across all markets. So probably the start of the design standards or the design system was the biggest eye opener, and probably the start of that actually stuck to form my current team before I left, and that was probably 5 or 6 years ago. So when I joined Fidelity, I joined to work on a UK investment platform, and when I started, there was no design system, no continuity. So we started to pull that together and create a UK system. And then we started to look across the globe. We had lots of different teams in different locations, from Germany to China to India to Japan. And then we started to look at the synergies across those. And initially, no one wants to bend on their standards. They think whatever they've done is the best. So how do you find common grounds, and how do you start working together, and how do you build those bridges between these different cultures? And that for me was fascinating, because it took me out of design solution, you know, creating a user interface or an experience map to map out what the customer needs, to actually, on a much more deeper empathetic level, understand user behavior. And for me, that was a big eye opener, because I moved from being a sort of hands-on designer to be a leader and to kind of open up my experience into the business world as well.
That's great. And I mean, it seems like a perfect segue into what we're going to be talking about, which is you're joining us November the 12th, speaking at the Product Design Week. You're going to be talking essentially about what it means to scale and translate your design work for that universal impact, which is what you've kind of started talking about here. Would you be able to give us a bit more into like what inspired this topic, and a bit of a sneak peek into some of those key insights that you're going to be sharing on this November?
Yeah, well, I think from the answer to my previous question really was, it was a whole new world it opened up for me. So, and what I get asked about a lot, you know, within teams I've worked with, or going and talking at events like Product Design Week, was, well, you know, you've done it. What insights have you got? How do we break this down into kind of actionable things we can take away? So I think it would start off, the most important thing, if you do UX or you build design, to anything to do with delivering user-centered design, is understanding and observing customer interactions and behavior. So, you know, you start out by doing this by looking at analytics. So that's going to indicate where you've got a problem. And then you're going to start doing usability assessments, and that's going to validate your hypothesis. So, right, I think I've got a problem here, work with users. And contrary to popular belief, this doesn't have to be a $30,000 lab study behind glass observing, you know, just 5 customers, and you can incentivize them very easily. You know, I used to do it at RSA, would stand where they had an office in Horsham, which is kind of between London and Brighton. We'd stand out in the shopping centre and offer people a £20 Marks and Spencer's voucher and a coffee to sit down and walk them through some proposals we had, some user interfaces. And that, you can really start from there. And once you pull out that, you understand what those insight is and what those key user experiences are, then you need to document them. So, you know, back to the talk, we're going to go into the research and cultural studies. So we'll go a bit broader around all the different things to think about for different regions and locations and cultures. And then we'll come back into, well, you've got those insights. And what a lot of companies do, are kind of go, oh, we've done a research, we'll send it around an email, and they forget about it. You've got to document it, and you've got to translate that insight into standards. And then you need to manage those standards. So every time you get a new insight, you need to iterate on that. And it goes further, really. When you get those standards as well and you've iterated, that might be right for one market, but you need to start thinking about, well, how do we scale that out? And something else I'm going to cover is, you know, how you translate your work to languages and cultures. So within the design system, you generally start with a brand. And and you can have multiple brands like at Fidelity or any other big organization. You're going to have all these sub brands as well. So that's kind of the core of the design language. Then you're going to have things like modes, so light and dark mode. You're going to switch them around. You're going to look at density. So, for example, in personal investing, if me and you are going to go and buy an ISA or some sort of investment vehicle, how we display it, and for different, say, younger markets, is going to be quite low density, loads of space around it, colourful, attractive for that market. If you look at any of the brands out there at the moment doing that, you'll see synergies from that. But then if you're an institutional investor, so you are the holder of a sovereign wealth fund, say Ghana, for example, you might want to look at it in a very different way. You don't want playful illustrations. So you need to understand all those different things and be able to apply it in a way on a strategic brand level to be able to deliver one design system for all those different customers. So we're going to definitely deep dive into that. And a couple of other things, content. So very much the afterthought in a lot of companies. You'll often find, and I know there's a whole section at Product Design Week, I think a day or 2 days on UX content. And I think you've got some great speakers as well, looking down the list. But it's the thing that's left by last. It's the most underinvested team, and it's probably would fix most UX issues straight away. So we'll look at about how we can bring that front and center, and also how we ensure we serve all our customers. So accessibility is a big part of that as well. You know, a lot of people think of accessibility as for people with disabilities. That's not true at all. It's about providing your product in the right context so everyone can use it. You know, it could be you're on a train trying to do some work and research products, so it's noisy, so you might need closed captions on, or you have to keep jumping in between meetings, which you're probably doing, Miles, and have to go back to where was that content I'm reading. So how do you bookmark it in the right way? So we're going to cover all of those points as well. So I think, to summarize, we're going to learn how to translate your work across languages and cultures. You're going to learn how research and cultural strategy is going to put your product in the right place, how you use frameworks and foundations to document all that research, and then how content is key. And by getting that right, you're probably going to fix most of your UX issues. But a very brief summary, because I haven't written it yet, so we've got a few months out, but those are sort of things I'm going to cover. And I will be posting on LinkedIn to ask if there's any particular things you want me to cover in my talk. I'll reach out to the Product Design Week audience, and then I'll try and cover them in the talk, and also give a shout out for any great questions that people ask. So I'll call them out in the talk as well.
That's awesome. An amazing outline there. And when you're ready to post that, let us know. We'll be sharing it more broadly to ensure that you get those awesome insights. And additionally, just to kind of piggyback what Stuart was mentioning, if you are interested in learning more about the kind of content strategy, the UX writing, that is Wednesday, the 13th, the day after Stuart will be speaking, and there is a whole day and track dedicated to that. So some great further learnings you can draw from there. What I wanted to ask, just related to your talk, is another kind of somewhat loaded question. Why, firstly, is this topic very relevant now, and who do you think it's going to be most applicable to?
Well, I think if you look at the current job market and advertisements going on at the moment, you'll see a lot of roles are remote. A lot of roles are spread across multiple locations. I mean, just looking this morning, a company, I won't say the company, but hiring in the US, hiring in Europe, hiring in India, hiring in China. There's a great big spread there, right? And what I found working with studios in India and China is a lot of times they're missing, because they might be building for different markets in Europe, and vice versa, they're missing the cultural context. So the more you can understand, and every time this comes back to user experience and user research, right? The more you can understand your customers, and all of them, the better results you're going to get. And I think this is in the current climate where you're either going remote or back to the office. Some companies are going fully remote, some go back to the office, and you're seeing a lot of people jumping ship. and going fully remote, it's really important to understand everything that you can about your customers and iterate on that. And this is why it's so important at the moment. Everything's changing. No one's set in a base. Everyone's moving around. And, you know, going back, I remember launching a product in Scandinavia for an insurance company called Trygg-Hansa, which was in Sweden. And they also had other parts of the business and other parts of Scandinavia. And if you know anything about Scandinavia, not all parts of Scandinavia get on. You know, you go across Finland and Sweden, and the very different cultures. And what's really important is to be there and understand it. And we made the mistake as being English and thinking that I kind of knew about all the different changes, and all the different cultural differences, but I didn't. And when the outcome of that was, we brought a product that worked really well in one country, it didn't in other countries, so in Norway and in Finland. So we had to go back. We then spent a lot of time understanding the culture, doing user research in those countries, training up our teams in those countries to do better research. And it was just very small differences, sometimes micro differences, but it made all the difference in the sorry, I lose my train of thought there. It made all the differences in terms of the results in the end. So, you know, very low conversion to high conversion just by doing that. And I think, going back to the original question, that's why it's so relevant now, is as you're working more remote and some of us may not leave our house, you need to do that groundwork and not based your work on assumptions from a 10-year-old study or what you used to do in your past job. It's not relevant. Be current.
I like that, yeah. And for anyone listening in who's considering Product Design Week this November and the Design Leaders Track, who would you say, obviously you're speaking at the Design Leaders Conference, that's the audience in general, but who would you say this is most relevant to as a subject and that discipline that they're going to be working?
Yeah, so I think for my talk and for a lot that I've seen being advertised at the moment, anyone for any levels. So although this is pitched at design leaders, you might be in a senior design or lead position, you might be looking to move up in your next role. I think you should be planning, you know, at least 18 months ahead in your career. So what's the next step? What do I need to get there? You know, some companies have frameworks. Here's what you need to be as a junior designer, middleweight, lead, you know, head of. Some people don't. But by having that tiered approach and understanding where you want to be going next, you're training and preparing yourself for that role. And by gaining these insights from Product Design Week, whether it's the design leaders, the UX content, or the research day, all of that is going to be useful information to move forward. And I'm a strong believer, whatever your specialism, and I believe a specialism is good, you should be, you know, T-shaped. So strong experience in one area, whether it's what UI design or product design or whatever you want to call it nowadays, but you know, that's your core. But then the T is a broad experience across user research, UX content, any other areas of digital design and development, and also business. Understand what your business does, how to talk to them. All of those things are useful in progressing your career. And if you don't have that, go and talk to your manager or your head of, and I'll find out what you need to move forward. But I think going to Product Design Week, if you could attend all of it and understanding all these different subjects and all these specialisms, will be a fantastic way for you to further your career and move on to those next steps.
Thanks for that, Stuart. A great plug for the event, if I ever heard one. Okay, I thank you for giving us such a good insight into your talk. I'm going to ask a few really quick questions. So I'm looking for like snappy answers if you've got them on the top of your head. Obviously, if it takes a minute, it's fine. But these are more general, and I want to start with what excites you most about the future of this industry. It could be trends, technologies, you know, the shape of what a designer looks like now. Would love to hear your thoughts on that.
I think there's a couple of things. I think the whole way we work is changing. You know, we did the whole let's work at home experiment. That's changed. But now it's how's it going to change moving forward? Are you going back to the office? Are you going to be fully remote? So I think that whole conversation is interesting, and that's going to change the way companies are built and run. So insight number one, I think that's a good one to look at. The other one is obviously new technologies. So everyone's going to probably have a bit of AI in their talk. Now, I don't see it as a way to create and build things as much. I see it as picking up all the grunt work and do all the things we don't want to do. Much like if you go back 20 years and watch a program, what's the future going to be like? You know, you'd have a robot making your dinner and stuff. That's what I see it should be good for. And you know, there's some really powerful large language models out there, but they're only based on and good as the information put in. And at the moment, you know, I want AI to, you know, do all the things I don't want to do, basically, and leave me to do the creative work. And I think people are kind of losing sight of that. So I think that's really exciting to see how that plays out. And then really there's a huge amount of ecological challenges going on at the moment, and humane challenges with wars. So how's that going to shape what's going on? We've had huge stock market crashes, we've had economic crashes, and we've had those humane crises. So how's that going to change how we operate in the future? I think massively, and no one knows exactly what it's going to do, but it has currently have an effect on a lot of people. But one thing I will say is when times are hard, that's when innovations happen. So if you know you don't have enough budget, you've got a crisis, you've got an international economic crisis, you've got wars going on, that's when you see real innovations happening. So hopefully we will see positives come out of all these negative situations.
I'm with you. Got my fingers and toes crossed. And my next question: how do you stay inspired? What do you do personally? That you mentioned at the start, this time you've had to do these personal self-love, you know, things for yourself, and particularly in terms of keeping your own creative juices flowing. Any advice or suggestions you'd share?
Yeah, I say one thing I don't do to start with. I don't look at portfolio websites and look, you know, the endless UI. To be honest, that's great if you want to share stuff, but get outside, walk in the forest, walk in the fields, go to art galleries, look at just historical stuff. You know, we can all learn from history, right? Generally, things are repeated again and again, but look outside of your realm of specialism. Put yourself in situations where you're not comfortable and things are difficult, because I'm a strong believer that, you know, when we put ourselves in difficult situations or we push ourselves, then we really find out who we are and we really self-develop.
I love that. And for those who are just starting out in this craft, I know that's a long time ago for you, but any advice that you give to people who are considering this as a career?
Ask a lot of questions. Don't be worried to ask too many questions. In my first role, I felt like I annoyed everyone in my office studio, because I was learning to program, I was learning design, I was learning video. So a 3D studio, I was trying to do everything at once, which is a very steep learning curve, and you need support in that. And if you work with the right people, if you have a great studio you work in, ask questions all the time, because it's the only way you're going to grow and the only way you're going to develop.
Amazing. Really great answer. And my last two questions, very quick ones. Tell us a fun fact about you, Stuart, that people might not know about you, that they can come up and break the ice at the event and speak to you about.
Well, you might know, I did a talk on this, but my great-great-grandfather invented the steam engine, so Stuart Trevithick. So if you go to the Science Museum, you can see his engine there, and it was, you know, the first, I guess, public transport he invented, so quite a big thing. And I've nowhere met the heights of his innovation, but it's a fun fact there.
That's a very fun fact. Awesome. And lastly, if you weren't in this career that you've brought yourself through to where you are today, what do you think you'd find yourself doing?
Well, I've just started up again something. I just started up something again. I started pretty much the same time, or probably a bit earlier than when I started in my career, and that was martial arts. So I've had a little bit of hiatus with having a daughter who's now 5 years old, and I've started taking her to lessons. And then on Sunday, I did a whole day of it, and I'm still recovering. But I really think that's something. It's hard to earn a lot of money out of teaching things like that, but in terms of your sense of worth, it gave me confidence I never had. I was a very shy child, and it brought me out of myself. It's given me confidence and health and longevity, and I'm just going back into that daily practice now. So it's a hard hill to climb when you've had some time off, but nothing good is ever easy, right? So you've got to work at it. So that would be my lesson, and maybe one day that'll be what I'm doing for a living again.
Awesome. Yeah, my uncle is actually a taekwondo instructor, so I used to do a lot when I was a child, and I went back to he does also Thai boxing and as well, and I went to a class, and the biggest struggle, just to kind of get through it and not be exhausted by the end. But yeah, it's a very kind of humbling and there's experience. There's a lot of practice, and it's not just about the fighting. It's about the mantras, the mindset. It's all up in here. Yeah. All right, Stuart, it's been a real pleasure to chat to you. We're very excited to welcome you this November. Any last comments you'd want to leave people with before I let you go?
I would say book your tickets, come to Product Design Week. It looks like a great week. I'm going to encourage other people to come. And I don't know any other conference that does a whole week. So plus, we haven't had many in-person ones over the last few years. So it's although we've got great speakers, and I'm very privileged to go along, that's half of the picture. The other half is networking, meeting people, realizing that all the problems you got at work, everyone else has those as well. And so problem share is a problem half. So come along, network, meet new people, and you never know where those relationships might end up. Yeah, that's it.
Thanks so much, Stuart. We're looking forward to welcoming you this November. Thanks for everyone for listening in. The full interview will be available on YouTube. You might be watching it there now. And we look very much forward to welcoming you, Stuart. So thank you again, and we'll speak soon.
Brilliant. Thanks, Miles. Take care. Bye.